G'day guys, it's your old mate Big J here and welcome to another edition of Aussie Boxing Talk. Of course, I'm your host, your old mate Big J. So what we're going to talk about today is Chernka Johnson, the new undisputed bantamweight women's champion of the world. She defeated Sharia Metcalf yesterday on the undercard to Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano 3. So, in what could be considered the performance of the night, I believe there was a $250,000 bonus. Whether or not Chernka actually got that, I'm not quite sure. But in the performance of her career, Chernka Johnson dominated Sharia Metcalf, and became the new bantamweight undisputed champion. Now, let's backtrack a bit. Right. First of all, I get really pissed off when the commentary fuck things up. Right. First of all, do your research, guys. Chernka's not Australian. She's a Kiwi, a Maori Kiwi. So she's a Indigenous New Zealand girl. Born in New Zealand. I think she's been living here since about the time... She's moved over to Australia. I think she was about 15 or so. And she started her pro career in Warrnambool, which is about 2.5 bit hours down the road from where I live here in Victoria. So she does have an Australian passport. She's an Australian citizen, but she is a Maori. She's a Kiwi girl. So, I mean, her whole pro career has been in Australia, but then again, so is Kostya, and we never consider Kostya an Australian because he's a Russian. But anyway, it's a bit of that grey area thing because she has represented Australia at the amateur level. She has been living here for a good 15 years. I think she came over here when she was a teenager. She's now 30. But, so Australia and New Zealand do have an undisputed bantamweight champion, and Chernka is the first and only woman from the area, I believe. Maybe Lenny Daniels might be in this boat. She's another Kiwi fighter. The only woman to win a unification bout. Title for title. If you remember, I think about a month or so ago, Desley Robinson, who is a born and bred Aussie, took on Chloe Chaos for Desley's IBF middleweight title and the vacant WBO middleweight title. So, but this undisputed bout was Chernka's WBA bantamweight title that she won off Nina Hughes. That a lot of people thought that Nina got screwed in the first fight, which was on the Vasily Lomachenko, George Kambosos card. I know, I was there, I saw it. But there was no doubt she won the rematch. She beat the living daylights out of her in the rematch. Sharia Metcalf's, I'll just call her Metcalf because I can't get her first name correct. Metcalf's IBF title, which she won off the Japanese girl, Maya Machida, I think her name was, who beat Ebony Bridges. And so it was Chernka's WBA title versus Metcalf's IBF title. And due to the fact that this was supposed to be actually Metcalf versus Dina Thorslund, who was the current WBC and WBO bantamweight titles, she has got herself pregnant. So she wants to start a family. Congratulate to her. So she vacated her 2 titles, and all the sanctioning bodies said, yep, bugger it. We'll chuck all 4 belts in together and we'll have ourselves an undisputed champion. So Chernka Johnson is the first woman to become undisputed in the 4-belt era. They did actually say, and I hope they were saying Australian, male or female, to become undisputed. I think they said on the commentary, Chernka Johnson is the first Australian male or female to become undisputed. That's bullshit, right? I really wish these fucking commentators would do their bloody research because they sound like a bunch of fucking wankers. They sound like a bunch of fucktards. Lionel Rose back in 1968 defeated Fighting Harada, who was the undisputed bantamweight champion in Japan over a 15-round decision in 1968. So I wish to God that these fellas would do their bloody research and realise, hey, Chernka's not the first Australian, because she, as I said before, she's not even Australian, she's a bloody Kiwi. So, you know, Lionel Rose was the first ever undisputed bantamweight champion. They didn't mention George Kambosos Jr. because George, in my book and many other books, was never undisputed. So I don't really have a drama with that. I don't think that George was ever undisputed. I don't count that franchise belt. But Lionel Rose was undisputed bantamweight champion long before Chernka Johnson was even heard of. So, but the other controversy around this, of course, was the stoppage. It was stopped in the 9th round. Metcalf come out, answered the bell. The doctor looked at her. The ref said, I don't like the punishment that she's taking. And I thought it was a good stoppage. A lot of people say that it was robbery. How? She got knocked down in the 4th and belted in the 5th. Chernka won every single round of that fight. If you go back and watch it, at no time was Metcalf in really any control of the fight. And she was not going to win on points because Chernka was way ahead on points. So to say that it was an unfair stoppage, I think was a bit of a fallacy. Because if it went to the cards, Metcalf would have lost anyway. So, but having said that, and this has happened many times in Australian boxing, I'm sure it's happened over the other countries in the world too. I'd like to use the example of Jeff Hitman Harding versus Dennis Andrews back in 1989 for the WBC light heavyweight title. Jeff Harding was losing every single round of that fight, getting the absolute piss kicked out of him, and he knocked Dennis Andrews out in the last round to have one of the biggest upsets of all time and probably one of the best comebacks of all time to become the first and only WBC light heavyweight champion of the world from Australia. So it has happened before. There are other examples. Danny Green versus Krzysztof Wlodarczyk. Danny Green was winning every round of that fight, beating up Krzysztof, and he got a punch in there in the 11th round and knocked Danny Green out and won the fight. So it has happened. It has happened before. More recently, Fabio Wardley. He was getting beaten by Justice Hooney. He wasn't getting beat up. He was getting beaten, clearly beaten. And then he pulled out that one miracle punch. Boom. Down goes Hooney. Wardley wins the fight. So it has happened, but I don't think Metcalf could have pulled out that miracle punch. She was just getting pummeled. And it's better to stop a fight 10 punches too early than 1 punch too late. So, and no one's mentioned this, but what about a rematch clause? I mean, if you're in a unification bout, you're putting your title up on the line, you should get a rematch clause. So they should be able to do it again. Because who's Chernka going to fight as her first defense? Unless it's the Japanese former champion. Ebony Bridges is not going to be back for a while, even though MPB signed her. So they're going to have a Chernka Ebony fight, but that won't happen for a while. She's just had a baby, so she's not going to be in the ring for at least probably 6 months, which will actually probably be perfect. Probably will be Ebony. Dina Thorstland's off having a baby, so she's out for at least a year and a half. So it's got to be one of the top contenders at bantamweight. So, and the problem with the bantamweight division is that, well, the problem with women's boxing is that all the champions, if you look at them, they're all in their late 30s. Amanda Serrano's 37, 38. Katie Taylor's 36. Ebony Bridges was 35. Like, all these women are all in their late 30s, early 40s, the ones who are dominating the divisions. Dina Thorstland's about the only champion that's in her 30s. Chernka's 30. But all the top head honchos are all in their late 30s. So it's time for the new generation to kick in, because I think even Sky Nicholson's pushing 30 now. And she had an absolute shocking fight the other day. Don't get me started on that. That was a joke. But, so Chernka Johnson is the new undisputed bantamweight champion. It's a very grey area because, yes, she is the first undisputed bantamweight champion of full belt era. You can't doubt that. Did she earn the shot? No, she didn't. It should have just been it should have been a unification bout between Chernka's WBA and Metcalf's IBF belt. Why the other belts got thrown in there, I don't know, because think about all the contenders in the bantamweight division ranked with the WBC and WBO. Why couldn't those girls have a potential fight? So the division is now going to be held up by Chernka. She must have at least, well, I don't know what Dina Thorstland's mandatory story was looking like. We all know that women's boxing is not as mandated as men's. So it's going to be interesting to see where Chernka goes from here. She's signed with MVP. I think they'll probably push very, very hard, or they'll be pushing very firmly for the Ebony fight. But as I said, I don't think Ebony will be in the ring for another 6 months. Excuse me. And that's end of the year, start of next year. So could it have happened in December? Probably. It could possibly happen in December, Chernka versus Ebony. They're well known to each other. They've been around the amateurs with each other. So, I mean, Ebony would be a good 7 or 8 years older than Chernka. So, and that's the one thing I wanted to bring up. Chernka's, if you look at Chernka's record, all she can do is beat up women who are 40 plus years old. All world title fights, with the exception of the Ali Scotney fight, have been against 40 plus year old women. Like the Mexican that she fought, the one title, I'm not quite sure how old she was. I should have looked that up beforehand because I look like a bit of a dickhead not knowing me facts. But she won the IBF Super Bantamweight title on the, it was in 2021, I think, or 2020. Was it 2022? No, it was 2022, sorry. That was the first fight I ever went to. That was Mick Zarafa, Isaac Hardman card. Chernka was on the undercard. She won the IBF Super Bantamweight title then. Defended it the same year against Susie Ramadan, who was 40 plus. And Susie's not a super bantamweight. She's a super flyweight, so there's a 7 pound difference there. She was much bigger than Susie. Then she fought Nina Hughes for Nina's bantamweight title. I thought Nina won that first fight. Once again, I said I was there. Actually, I've been to a couple of Chernka Johnson's fights. I've been to 3. I've been to 3 of Chernka Johnson's fights. And all world titles. How about that? So, yeah, then she beat Nina Hughes in the first fight, which I thought Nina won. But the rematch, there was no buts and maybes. Chernka beat the crap out of poor old Nina Hughes, who looked every second of her 42 years of age. So that's the problem. Once you hit 40, you can age a decade overnight. So that's the problem. Even men, but more so the women, they age a decade overnight. So, and then of course she's fought Metcalf in the unification bout for Undisputed, and Metcalf was 40. So she came up against Ali Scotney, who was, I think, around her age or younger at the time, and Ali Scotney tarred her up. I can't remember if that was a unification bout or not. I'm not 100% sure. But Ali Scotney beat Chernka 7 rounds to 3. So, I mean, people are saying, oh, you know, how good Chernka, be like, pump the brakes. Her record shows, and a 38-year-old Shannon O'Connell beat her on the undercard to Mundine Zarafa. So when she actually goes up against a younger woman, she loses. Her record shows she can only beat older ladies, like much older. Susie Ramadan would have been 12 or 13 years older. Metcalf was a decade. You know, Nina Hughes was, well, you know, she can only beat women that are well over a decade older. Put her with someone same age or younger, she loses. So it'll be very interesting to see what Chernka does in the future. I think they're going to push heavily for the Ebony Bridges fight before the end of the year. I think it'll be probably in December, depending on what Ebony's training schedule is. But anyway, guys, that's me. I'm your old mate, Big J. Tackle the ball, wrestle croc. Hold yourselves the fuck up. Have yourselves a great day.